Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back here to St. Paul's Church National Historic Site in Mount Vernon, New York, and our continuing series, History from St. Paul's. Today, we're actually in historic St. Paul's Church, talking about the story behind this small pewter sanctuary lamp made in the 19th century and donated here to St. Paul's in 1944 by a woman named Iphigene Ox-Sulzberger. Originally, it's actually a ner tamid, that's in Hebrew, so the rough translation would be an eternal light. It was displayed in a German Jewish synagogue in Landau, Germany, and in that setting, it would be near the front of the sanctuary, guarding the ark which holds the Torah scrolls, the Old Testament, the Jewish Bible, symbolizing the eternal presence of God and God's bond with the Jewish people. Quite a journey, literally and spiritually, here to an Episcopal church in Westchester County, New York. And here, the same piece of religious ritual is understood to mean the Blessed Sacrament and the eternal presence of Jesus. It's brought to America in the mid-19th century by a man named Joseph Levy, L-E-V-Y. He's a 48er. So those are the political exiles and refugees from the failed revolutions in 1848 in Europe who come to America. He brought it as a family heirloom, so even though it was in their synagogue in Landau, it was his personal property, and as an immigrant, he brought it over here. It's passed down to his grandson, a man named Adolf Ochs, O-C-H-S, who is a very successful printer-publisher, owns successful newspapers in the Upper South, moves to New York in 1896, purchases what was then the declining New York Times, revives it, expands it, and makes it one of the nation's great newspapers. And then the lamp is then given to his daughter, Iphigene Ox-Sulzberger, that's her married name. She presents it here in 1944. It's presented here because, especially at the time, the site resonated and was constantly emphasized as having a special connection to the Bill of Rights and especially the First Amendment's guarantee of a free press. The connection goes back to an election here in 1733 in colonial times, and the coverage of it, an unprecedented source of coverage in the inaugural issue of the New York Weekly Journal, which was printed in New York by the printer John Peter Zenger. Based on that election and its coverage and subsequent developments, this site was prized, especially during the World War II era, and seen almost in a spiritual way as the birthplace of a free press and the value that it has in a democratic society. And there were many events here in the World War II era which welcomed St. Paul's as a source and an inspiration of what a free press meant in a democratic society. And in the World War II era, Americans rediscovered and reemphasized their Bill of Rights. It became one of the landmarks of their political heritage, especially since overseas, their adversaries they're confronting on all fronts are deeply repressive fascistic societies. Americans started to see more maybe than in the past the Bill of Rights as a special piece of their birthright that created a society of democratic principles. So because of that, and it overlapped with World War II, many events here during World War II emphasized the idea that St. Paul's was almost a source and a place to value the concept of a free press. So the Ox-Sulzberger family, which owned the New York Times, as a donation and as a contribution to a site seen as the birthplace of the free press, is presenting this family heirloom in 1944. So it's World War II, and it would have resonated here so much that day. May 8, 1944. We're a year before VE Day. We're still a month before the famous Normandy D-Day invasion. In a very crowded religious sanctuary, everybody here, they probably almost didn't have to say anything. Everybody has a family member, neighbor, or friend who's in harm's way in the armed forces. Many people had suffered loss and grief. Everybody's part of the bond drives and the scrap drives and the rationing. The World War II emphasis was strong, and the idea that they were in a setting which had a special connection to why America was fighting was probably just palpable. So that day it's accepted by Reverend Harold T. Weigel, the rector of St. Paul's Church at the time. He's assisted by Rabbi Jonah Wise, who's from a synagogue in New York City and a friend of the Ox-Sulzberger family. Even that, the idea that a Jewish family is welcomed in and feels comfortable in a Protestant church was part of the emphasis, that America was a country, especially at that time, the emphasis of religious toleration and religious freedom and religious cooperation, in stark contrast to their enemies overseas. So I'm sure everybody here that day understood what the war was about. They were feeling the grief, they were experiencing sacrifice, and they were in a setting and in presentation that re-emphasized that. It's also a late afternoon ceremony, okay, May 8, 1944, not in the evening, but late in the afternoon. St. Paul's is in a blackout zone throughout the war. At the time, it's no longer here, but just south of us, you had big oil tankers going back to the early 1920s. It's not a refinery, but it's a storage facility for oil distribution to homes and light industry all throughout this area. So because of that, it never happened. It was on a special watch list throughout the war. There were fears of enemy sabotage or maybe of an enemy raid, so this area is blacked out throughout the war. So you're late in the afternoon on May 8, 1944, the Ox-Sulzberger family, represented by Iphigene, to whom the lamp had been passed down from many generations from Joseph Levy, who brought it over from the German Jewish Synagogue in Landau, is donating it to the church right in the middle of World War II. And it is interesting that a piece of religious sculpture worked both in a synagogue in Germany and in a Protestant church here in Westchester County. So it was hoisted up there on May 8, 1944. It has been there ever since. Please join us again next week for another edition of History from St. Paul's.